My brother demanded my grandmother's entire estate because he was the eldest grandson, carried our grandfather's name, and had sons to inherit it after him. I stayed silent while he called the house his birthright. Then the attorney opened the will and announced what Grant had received: $0. Grant's palm hit the table hard enough to make the glasses jump. "I'm the eldest grandson," he said. "I carry Grandpa's name. I have 2 sons. That house stays with my branch of the family." No one answered him. My mother stared at her hands. Aunt Carol pressed a tissue against her lips. Across from me, Gerald Mercer, my grandmother's attorney, waited without expression. I kept my hands folded. That seemed to infuriate Grant more than any argument could have. "Don't sit there acting calm, Evan. You know exactly what Grandma intended." He was wrong. I knew more than that. 6 weeks earlier, I had sat in the chair, under the same slow clock, while my grandmother looked at Gerald and explained what she wanted done. Her voice had been tired, but every word had been deliberate. So while Grant pounded the table and claimed a future he had already spent, I said nothing. The truth was already in the room. He just hadn't heard it yet. Grant called it hovering. That was his word for the 4 years I spent rearranging shifts so I could drive Grandma Ruth to dialysis before sunrise. Hovering meant checking the furnace when the temperature dropped, replacing the loose rail beside her basement steps, sorting 12 prescriptions into plastic trays, and sleeping in the recliner after her hip surgery because she was afraid she would fall trying to reach the bathroom alone. I changed her dressings until the incision closed. I salted the porch before the transport van arrived. I learned which pharmacy would fill her heart medication without arguing with the insurance company for 40 minutes. Grant's version of concern was different. Every few weeks, he sent a message from a job site, a fishing trip, or whatever restaurant he had chosen for another business dinner. "You doing okay, Grandma?" Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she stared at the screen for a while, then set the phone down without typing anything. He rarely noticed the difference. Grandma never complained about him. She did, however, keep an old blue ledger beside her chair. It came from Mercer Supply, the hardware store she had run for nearly 35 years, and she wrote in it with the same careful block letters she had once used for inventory. Dates, visits, phone calls, money borrowed, promises made. Beside some entries, she added a check mark. Beside others, she drew a short line and left the space after it empty. At first, I assumed she was worried about her memory and needed everything written down. So I never asked what the entries meant. I didn't understand that the ledger wasn't there because she was forgetting. It was there because she knew the rest of us might someday find it easier to forget for her. My name is Evan Mercer. I'm 35, and I've spent 12 years working as a critical care paramedic for county EMS outside Dayton. The job teaches you to trust patterns over explanations. People will tell you they're fine while their skin says otherwise. Families will insist nothing is wrong while every detail in the room points the other way. That skill followed me home. Grandma Ruth lived in the gray farmhouse at the edge of town, with a front porch and a red barn behind it. My grandfather built the additions himself before he died, including the mudroom where his initials were scratched into the trim. For 35 years, Grandma ran Mercer Supply, a hardware and farm store where she could price nails from memory and spot a dishonest invoice before breakfast. Grant was 3 years older than me. He was the first grandson, carried our grandfather's middle name, and grew up hearing that he would keep the family line going. When he married Melissa and had 2 sons, that story hardened into something permanent. I was the other one. The reliable one. If a fence needed fixing, Evan could handle it. If Grandma needed a ride, Evan was nearby. If Grant forgot something, I was told not to make a scene because he had bigger responsibilities. Our mother did not create all of that alone, but she protected it. Grant's mistakes became pressure. Mine became character flaws. He learned charm early. Adults liked him before they knew him, and by the time they noticed what he avoided, someone else had usually cleaned it up. That someone was often me. I'm not saying this to punish the boy he used to be. Children don't design the rooms that favor them. But adults decide whether to keep living by those rules. Grant did. Eventually, he began treating Grandma's money the same way he treated every family responsibility, as something waiting for me to carry until he was ready to claim the reward himself. The first sign that something was wrong arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I had finished a 14-hour shift and stopped by Grandma's house with a refill for her blood pressure medication. She was at the kitchen table sorting mail into 3 stacks: bills, advertisements, and things she wanted me to examine. One envelope sat by itself. It was cream-colored and carried the logo of a company I had never seen before. Grant's roofing business was printed beneath the return address. "What's that?" I asked. Grandma slid it farther away. "Just something for Grant's company," she said. "He told me not to worry about it." That sentence should have stopped me harder than it did. Grant borrowed money the way other people borrowed tools. Casually, repeatedly, always with the same promise that payment would clear and everything would be settled soon. Grandma had helped him before, usually in amounts small enough that questioning them felt cruel. I was tired. She looked embarrassed. So I let it go? 3 weeks later, she mentioned over coffee that Grant had brought papers for her to sign. "What kind of papers?" "Something about a supplier account." "Did you read them?" She rubbed her thumb along the rim of her mug. He explained them. "That isn't what I asked." Her eyes dropped. "No, not all of it." The cold feeling that moved through me was familiar. In emergency medicine, one number outside the normal range can mean nothing. A pattern means you prepare before anyone else understands why. I called Grant that night. He laughed before I finished asking. "It's a standard vendor guarantee, Evan. Businesses use them every day." "Why did Grandma have to sign it?" "Because she has better credit than the company right now." Did she understand what she signed? His voice sharpened. "You drive an ambulance. You don't run a business." Then he softened, as if that settled it. "Relax. Nothing is happening to the house." The next weekend, I asked Grandma to keep copies of anything Grant brought her. I tried to make it sound routine, not alarming. She agreed because she trusted me, but also because she still trusted him. For several months, no more papers appeared. I convinced myself I had overreacted. Then an envelope arrived with Grandma's name, an account number she didn't recognize, and the farmhouse clearly listed where collateral should have been. The statement was 4 pages long. I read the first page twice before I understood what I was looking at. The farmhouse was listed as security for a revolving line of credit issued to Grant's company. The current balance was $74,500. Grandma sat across from me at the kitchen table, watching my face instead of the paper. "What does it mean?" she asked. I wanted to answer immediately. I wanted to tell her it was probably fixable, probably clerical, probably less serious than it looked. But I had spent too many years watching families lose time because someone offered comfort before facts. "It means I need a lawyer to explain it," I said. The next morning, I called Rebecca Sloan, an elder law attorney a coworker had recommended after his father's estate became complicated. She agreed to meet us that afternoon. Rebecca read the documents quickly, then went back through them more slowly. "This is not a vendor guarantee," she said. She turned the statement toward Grandma and placed one finger beneath the account heading. "It is a secured business line. Your home is the collateral." Grandma blinked once. "I never borrowed $74,000. "The funds were not paid to you," Rebecca said. They were released in 4 draws to Mercer Restoration Group, Grant's company. The room went quiet. Rebecca showed us the signature page. Grandma's name was there in blue ink. So was a notarized acknowledgement stating that she understood the property could be seized if the loan went unpaid. Grandma touched the signature as if it belonged to someone else. He said I was helping him open an account with a supplier. Did anyone explain that your house could be sold? No. Did you meet the notary alone? No. Grant was there. Did anyone advise you to speak with your own attorney? She shook her head. I felt anger rising, but it did not feel hot. It felt precise, like the moment before an emergency call turns from uncertain to critical and every unnecessary thought drops away. Rebecca drove with us back to the farmhouse. She walked Grandma through every clause at the kitchen table, slowly enough that no one could later claim she had been confused about what she learned. When Grandma finally understood, she did not cry. She looked through the window toward the red barn my grandfather had rebuilt after a storm in 1987. Then she looked at the doorway where his height marks still remained beneath layers of paint. He used our house, she said. Rebecca did not soften it. Yes. For his company. Yes. And if he doesn't pay? The lender could pursue the property. Grandma folded her hands in her lap. For most of my life, I had watched her forgive people before they apologized. That afternoon, something in her face changed. It did not break. It settled into place. Then she looked at me and said, "Bring me the blue ledger." That was when I understood she had been keeping more than notes for a reason. Rebecca recommended we contact Adult Protective Services before Grant had time to move anything else. Not because we're accusing him in advance, she said. Because once money starts moving through family accounts, people suddenly remember events differently. The caseworker assigned to Grandma was Daniel Price, a quiet man in his 50s who had spent 14 years investigating financial exploitation of older adults. He sat at her kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and spoke to her without raising his voice or talking down to her. Did you understand the loan when you signed? No. Did Grant tell you the house could be taken? No. Did he ask you not to discuss the papers with Evan? Grandma looked at me, then back at Daniel. Yes. He wrote that answer down. The process moved painfully slowly. Daniel explained that cases like this rarely arrived looking like crimes. They arrived as valid signatures, notarized pages, and relatives insisting everyone had agreed. What mattered was the pattern. That was where the blue ledger changed everything. Grandma had recorded each request Grant made over the previous 3 years. $500 for payroll, $2,000 for roofing materials, $900 because an insurance check was delayed. Every entry included the date, the amount, what Grant promised, and when he claimed he would repay it. Most repayment lines were blank. Rebecca brought in a forensic accountant named Samuel Cho, who specialized in tracing money through small businesses. He spent almost a month reviewing bank records, transfers, company statements, and the 4 draws from the secured credit line. When he finally met with us, he placed a folder on Rebecca's desk and said, "This wasn't one bad decision. It was a system." The $74,500 had gone directly into Grant's business account. From there, some paid suppliers and crews. Some covered overdue equipment loans. Nearly $8,000 had been transferred into Grant and Melissa's personal checking account. Samuel also identified another $13,800 Grandma had given Grant in smaller advances over 2 years. None of it had been fully repaid. Taken separately, each transaction could be explained as family helping family. Taken together, it looked like Grant had treated Grandma as an emergency credit line with no consent, no limits, and no expectation that she would ever demand an accounting. I wish I could say that ended any doubt I had. It didn't. Some part of me still wanted him to explain it in a way that made him selfish, maybe, but not deliberate. I wanted to believe he had panicked, made one reckless choice, and planned to fix it before anyone got hurt. Then Daniel found a note in the ledger beside the loan documents. Grant says Evan doesn't need to know yet. That single sentence erased the last excuse I had left for him. He had not simply hidden a debt from me. He had used Grandma's trust, then made secrecy part of the arrangement from the beginning itself. I called Grant that evening from the parking lot behind the EMS station. No lawyer, no caseworker, just me. Tell me what happened with Grandma's house, I said. Start there. For a second, he was silent, and I let myself believe it meant shame. Then he exhaled like I was wasting his time. You don't understand cash flow, Evan. I needed working capital. You used her house. I used equity that was sitting there doing nothing. She didn't understand the papers. She understood enough. My grip tightened. Then why did you tell her not to tell me? His answer came. Because you panic about everything. This was temporary. I'll have it handled before she ever has to deal with it. Before she ever has to deal with it. Something done with her name, her signature, and her home. That sentence closed the last door I had left open for him. You need to tell Rebecca everything, I said. Grant laughed once. Or what? I ended the call. For the first time, I stopped hoping he would choose to do the right thing. Grandma's health began to decline that winter. There was no ambulance ride, no sudden diagnosis, no single moment anyone could call the beginning. She simply became more tired. Her cough lingered. The distance from the kitchen to the porch started costing her more than it used to. I adjusted my shifts around her appointments and began sleeping at the farmhouse 2 or 3 nights a week. Grant started calling more often. Not to ask how she felt. He wanted to discuss the property. He told her the house needed expensive repairs. He said managing it alone was becoming unrealistic. He suggested transferring it into a family company now, while she was still clear enough to guide the process. What he meant was a company he controlled. I heard one of those calls from the hallway. Think about the boys, Grant said through the speaker. Dad's name should stay with the family. Evan doesn't even have children. What happens to the place after him? Grandma sat very still. Grant kept going. He told her his sons could preserve the barn, keep the land together, and carry the Mercer name another generation. He made it sound like refusing him would be the same as erasing our grandfather. Then he said, we should settle ownership before lawyers turn it into a mess. Grandma ended the call without answering. For several seconds, she stared at the dark phone screen. I stepped into the room. He thinks I don't understand what he's doing, she said. Her voice was weaker than it had been in the fall, but there was nothing weak in the way she looked at me. I understand exactly what he's doing. She asked me to call Rebecca and Gerald Mercer, the attorney who had handled my grandfather's estate. I want this finished while my mind is still mine, she said. I will not leave you to clean up another mess he made. The next morning, she put on her best blue coat, carried the ledger under one arm, and walked into Gerald's office without asking what I thought she should do. Gerald Mercer had handled my grandparents' legal affairs for 3 decades. He was the kind of attorney who read every page twice and never let anyone sign while someone else was talking. Rebecca joined us as Grandma's counsel. For the first 40 minutes, I sat beside her. Then Gerald asked me to leave while they discussed the terms. I did. That mattered later. When they called me back, a camera stood on a tripod near the window. Grandma sat beneath the afternoon light with the blue ledger beside her. Gerald asked her name, the date, where she was, and why she had requested the meeting. Rebecca asked questions establishing that Grandma understood her property, her relatives, and the consequences of every decision. Her answers were slow, but exact. She placed the farmhouse, the Mercer Supply property, and most of her savings into a testamentary trust. I would serve as one trustee alongside an independent administrator. The house could not be sold for 12 years. If it was sold after that, most of the proceeds would fund emergency medical training scholarships and a community equipment program. She was not handing me money. She was handing me responsibility. Then Gerald started recording. Grandma looked directly into the camera. I am making these choices because I understand what has been done with my property, she said. No one has pressured me. Evan did not ask me for anything. She explained that she wanted Grant to hear her reasons in her own voice, not through an argument someone else could rewrite after she died. She passed away 12 days later in the bedroom she had shared with my grandfather. I was beside her. Near dawn, she opened her eyes and said, "You always came without asking what would be yours." At the time, I thought she was saying goodbye. I did not yet understand that she was also telling me what she had decided. The 4 weeks between Grandma's funeral and the will reading felt unreal. Grief was one thing. Watching Grant behave as if the estate belonged to him was another. He started calling the farmhouse our place, though ours seemed to mean him. He told Melissa they would tear out Grandma's kitchen. He promised his older son the red barn would become a gym and told the younger one he could keep dirt bikes on the back acreage. 2 weeks before the will was read, Grant listed his house for sale. When my mother asked whether that was wise, he laughed. Grandma always intended the farm for me. Everyone knows that. He said it like a family fact, not a guess. At the funeral luncheon, he walked relatives through his renovation plans between bites of ham. He complained about the roof, estimated the land's value if divided, and spoke about Mercer Supply as if it were already another company asset. I listened without correcting him. He mistook my silence for surrender. What never crossed his mind at all was that Grandma had understood the loan, documented the pressure, met with 2 attorneys, and left her own instructions. Grant had built his future on a house whose owner had finally stopped forgiving him. Gerald waited until everyone was seated before opening the document. Grant did not wait. He struck the table and demanded that Gerald skip to the section concerning the farmhouse. "I'm the eldest grandson," he said. "I carry Grandpa's name, and I have 2 sons. That property belongs with me." Gerald adjusted his glasses. "Your grandmother instructed that the will be read in full." "Then read the part where she leaves me the farm." My mother stared at the floor. Aunt Carol held a tissue against her mouth. Melissa sat beside Grant, rigid and silent. I kept my hands folded. Gerald began. "To my grandson, Grant Mercer, who has often spoken of inheritance as something owed by birth, I leave the amount that reflects what he earned through his care, honesty, and stewardship." Grant leaned back. For 1 second, he smiled. Gerald turned the page. $0. The room became so quiet that I heard the clock above the bookshelves click forward. Grant's smile disappeared. "That's not legal." "It is," Gerald said. "She forgot me. She identified you by name, relationship, and date of birth. You were not omitted." Grant stood so quickly his chair hit the wall. She was confused. Evan got inside her head. Rebecca opened a second folder. Mrs. Mercer was independently evaluated for testamentary capacity on the day these documents were executed. She met privately with both attorneys. Evan was removed from the room during the discussion. Grant pointed at me anyway. He poisoned her against me. I finally looked at him. You didn't lose this because of me, Grant. You spent it years ago. He moved toward the document, but our cousin Nathan caught his sleeve before he reached the table. A security officer appeared in the doorway. Gerald continued in the same level voice. The farmhouse, the former Mercer Supply building, the investment account, and the remaining personal assets had been transferred into the Ruth Mercer Community Trust. I was named co-trustee with a professional administrator. The house could not be sold for 12 years. I could live there and maintain it, but I could not borrow against it, divide the land, or use it as personal collateral. If the property was eventually sold, most proceeds would fund scholarships for paramedic training and emergency equipment for rural communities. Grant stared at me. That's almost $2 million. No, Gerald said. It is a trust worth approximately that amount. Mr. Mercer has duties, not unrestricted ownership. That distinction seemed to anger Grant even more. He had expected a prize he could consume. Grandma had created something he could neither claim nor destroy. Gerald closed the will. Then he placed a sealed letter in front of Grant. Your grandmother also left instructions that you receive this. Grant tore it open. As he read, the anger left his face first. Then the certainty. Then the color. Gerald waited until Grant finished reading the letter. Then he opened the second folder. He placed copies of the loan documents across the table, the secured credit line, the 4 withdrawals, the personal transfers, the repayment promises from Grandma's ledger. Melissa leaned forward. What is that? Grant did not answer. My mother whispered his name. Gerald pressed a button on the console. The screen came to life. Grandma appeared as she had 6 weeks earlier, sitting beneath the office window in her blue coat. She looked tired. Her hands rested on the ledger. Her eyes were clear. If Grant is angry, she said, ask him about the papers he brought to my house. Grant turned toward Gerald. Shut it off. Gerald let the recording continue. I signed the first document because my grandson told me it was for a supplier account. I was not told my home could be taken. I was not told how much money he intended to use. Melissa's face changed. Grandma continued. Evan found the statement. He brought me to an attorney. He never asked me for the house. He asked whether I understood what had been done with it. Grant pushed back from the table. This is manipulation. Rebecca slid the capacity evaluation beside the loan records. No, she said. This is documentation. On the screen, Grandma placed one hand over the ledger. I am not excluding Grant because he is the eldest grandson. I am not excluding him because he is a man. I am excluding him because he used my trust as credit already owed to him. No one moved. Then she said the sentence that broke whatever defense he had left. I am giving Grant exactly what he brought into my home: pressure, absence, and debts disguised as promises. Grant sat down. Not slowly. His legs simply stopped holding him. My mother covered her mouth. Melissa stared at the records as if they had rewritten her marriage. Grant looked at me once, but there was no anger left. Only the realization that Grandma had not misunderstood him. She had understood him completely. The meeting did not end when the video stopped. Gerald explained that the trust documents were only one part of what Grandma had prepared. The loan records, Daniel Price's report, and Samuel Cho's accounting had already been forwarded for formal review. Grant's business accounts had not been permanently seized, but the lender had placed temporary restrictions on several of them while investigators traced the transfers. Payments to suppliers were delayed. 2 active contracts were suspended after the bonding company learned that Grant had secured business debt with property he did not own. The lender was under scrutiny too. Rebecca had asked why an 83-year-old woman had been allowed to pledge her home for a commercial credit line without independent advice. The notary's records were being reviewed. So were the documents Grant had brought into Grandma's kitchen. None of us knew yet whether the case would become criminal. Gerald said that carefully. But the debts were real. And they remained Grant's. Melissa was waiting in the hallway when he left the conference room. Through the glass, I saw him speak quickly, his hands moving the way they always did when he believed confidence could replace facts. She did not move. "You told me Evan stole your inheritance," she said. Grant looked toward the elevator. "You told me the company was fine." He had no answer ready. That may have been the first time in his adult life that silence belonged to him instead of everyone around him. Melissa removed her wedding ring, not dramatically, just slowly, and put it in her purse before walking away. I never learned what she decided that day. I only know she took the boys to her sister's house that night. My mother called me after dark. For years, every conflict involving Grant had ended with her asking me to be reasonable, forgive first, or protect the family from embarrassment. This time, she said, I helped him believe he could do this. I stood in Grandma's kitchen, looking at the empty chair beside the blue ledger. "Yes," I said, "you did." She started crying. I did not comfort her by changing the truth. The trust moved forward. Mercer Supply became a community medical equipment pantry. The first scholarship was scheduled for the following spring. Grant had expected Grandma's death to make him richer. Instead, it made every promise he had broken impossible to hide. And for once, nobody in family stepped forward to carry the consequences for him. The farmhouse felt different the first night I unlocked it alone. Not richer. Heavier. I set my keys on the kitchen table and, out of habit, listened for Grandma's slippers in the hallway, for the kettle, for her voice asking whether I had eaten. There was only the refrigerator humming and the clock above the sink. The blue ledger was waiting. I sat in Grandma's chair and read the pages. Grant's visits were scattered and brief. His calls appeared more often when he needed money. Beside each promise to repay, Grandma had left space for the date it happened. Most of those spaces were empty. My name appeared differently. Evan replaced Portrail. Evan drove me to dialysis. Evan stayed after surgery. Evan brought soup and did not stay long because he had worked all night. I had never known she recorded those things. At the time, they had felt too ordinary to count. Near the pages, her handwriting became smaller. A few letters shook. The meaning did not. Grant believed being the eldest made him the keeper of our family. But he had confused carrying a name with carrying its weight. The trust was not a reward for me. Most of it would never be mine to spend. The house required maintenance. The pantry needed oversight. The scholarship fund came with reports, meetings, and responsibilities that would outlive the anger in that conference room. That was exactly why Grandma had chosen it this way. On the last page, she had written one sentence. Evan never asked what would become his. That is why I can trust him with what must remain. I read it twice. Then I closed the ledger, sat in the house, and understood the inheritance. It was not property. It was proof that she had been paying attention.